This week I'm looking at a whiskey that often features on the top 10 lists of affordable, approachable bourbons, Woodford Reserve. Welcome back to the channel. My name's Matt and I'm a bit of a whiskey nerd. Like I said, this week I'm looking at Woodford Reserve Bourbon. So let me get into the glass and I'll tell you all about it. But first, if you're new here, scroll down, hit that thumbs up button, hit that subscribe button. I put out a new whiskey review every Wednesday and a cocktail recipe every Friday, so subscribe and you'll see them all. Woodford Reserve is a Kentucky Straight Bourbon. That means it's aged for at least 2 years in new American oak barrels. It's also made with 72% corn, 18% rye, and 10% malted barley, so you can expect a whiskey that's sweet, but also got a lot of spice behind it. This is coming out of Brown-Forman. They're the same company that make whiskies like Old Forester or Jack Daniels, so they've a good pedigree behind them, and for this whiskey they've triple distilled it in copper pot stills. Now, normally you'd expect a bourbon not to be triple distilled, maybe be double distilled, but they've gone for triple distillation. That generally makes a whiskey smoother and kind of lighter, and because it's been distilled in copper pot stills, that'll probably add a nice kind of rich, silky, dense mouthfeel to the whiskey. Like I said, this often features on lists of bourbons that are good for getting to know the category, that are nice and affordable, nice and approachable, and just a really good representation of a good, oaky, spicy bourbon. So, that's enough talking about it. Let's get in for the nose. Right off the bat, there's a nice kind of balance of sweetness and oak spice coming through. Like there's a fair bit of oak spice there, but there's a really nice kind of rich, dense, really kind of like a butterscotch toffee, that kind of nice, rich, kind of brown sugar sweetness that comes through. There's also a little bit of maybe leather, that kind of dense, dark kind of smell. As well as maybe a little bit of vanilla buttercream frosting, you know, that kind of very sweet vanilla frosting you get on a cake, like that kind of really sweet nose on it. There's also a little bit of cocoa, maybe. Hey, there's a good bit of spice coming through here. There's nice different evolutions on the nose. I wouldn't say I'm getting a lot of fruit off this. Like normally in a bourbon I might smell a bit of cherry, but for here I'm not really getting a lot of fruit. Maybe a little bit of fruit, like maybe something like an orange peel, that kind of smell, but I'm not really getting a lot of fruit coming off here. It's mostly those sweet flavors, those spices, and those kind of dense, kind of leathery, rich spices. So let's go in for the palate. It is a dense palate. There's a lot of flavor that just kind of hits you up front. The most dominant note I get on the first taste, it's definitely oak tannin, like that kind of mouth drying tannin. There's a good bit of spice, the kind of spice you get with like a Christmas cake, that kind of warming, rich, kind of cinnamon, nutmeg, really kind of strong cloves in there too. Those kind of spices that warm you up. I'm also getting a little bit of kind of barrel char, again coming through from that oak. It's more dense than just a regular oak tannins. There's a good bit of barrel char coming through here. So I'm going to go in again and see if I can get past those oaky notes and see if I can find some of those other notes from the nose. Okay, second go around, that kind of cocoa note I was getting on the nose, it's kind of maybe transformed into like an espresso note, not tasting like a coffee, but that same kind of dense, kind of almost acidic, dark, roasted kind of note. That's kind of what I'm getting through here. That might be coming through from the barrel char and from that rye spice, the two of those combining together to give you that kind of dark, rich note. In terms of sweetness, that vanilla frosting, it's practically absent. Now there is still sweetness coming through. It's more of a caramel sweetness. It's more of a kind of, again, that butterscotch, that toffee kind of sweetness. The lighter vanilla frosting kind of sweetness I was getting in the nose, that's, for me at least, not really present in the palate. So I'm going to go in again, but we'll talk about the finish. Okay, the finish, it's long. Like there's a long tail on this whiskey. It doesn't have huge evolution. Now it is the same kind of notes I was getting in the palate. Like there's that oak spice, there's that char, there's those kind of Christmassy, warm spices, they hang around. But in terms of an evolution, there's not really an evolution, it's more just a continuation from the palate. Those notes kind of fade away. There's not much fruitiness coming through. The sweetness does fade away pretty quickly, leaving with just those kind of oak, char notes and those spices. I can see why this is on people's lists as a good whiskey, a good bourbon for introducing people to like an oaked bourbon, where that oak spice character is quite present in the whiskey while still maintaining that balance of spice and sweetness. Like, as you can see, I do quite enjoy this whiskey and I really like it in a cocktail, because if you're looking for a cocktail where you can taste those classic kind of bourbon notes, this is something where it's strong enough that it can follow through into the cocktail. It can follow through into a cocktail that has like sweet things, that has kind of herbal notes, and it can still be present and you can still kind of taste a bourbon in that cocktail. That said though, if I was going to introduce a person into the whole category of bourbon, I might not start with this one. I would probably start with something like an Eagle Rare or Buffalo Trace, those kind of more lighter, more approachable whiskies, because the oak in this might scare someone off. In the same way that you might introduce someone to white wine before you introduce them to red wine, because those tannic notes, those kind of mouth-drying notes in the red wine might put someone off and not let them enjoy it as much as they would if they got to know the category. Same way here, I think those dry tannic notes just maybe a little bit too overpowering for some people. So if you like bourbon and you haven't tried Woodford Reserve, I definitely say to check it out. It's a great whiskey, it goes really well in cocktails. If you're looking though to expand your horizons and move into bourbons, I'd say maybe start somewhere else, but then have this as your third or your fourth bottle that you try out. And that's, I think, where I'm going to leave it for this week. I'll see you next week with another review. Sláinte.